It's not a question of if you will lose photos, it's a question of when. Let's talk about how to safeguard your photos so that this never actually happens. Hi, and welcome to the DIY Photo Organising Podcast. I am Chantal from Photos in Order, and I share ideas, practical tips, and inspiration to help you organize, manage, and preserve your photos so you can get them back into your life and enjoy them. Now, today I'm relaunching this podcast, and I thought there is no better place really to start than right back at the beginning, because this whole show is built around 5 golden rules of photo organizing, which is a framework that Fiona and I developed, and it takes you basically from an overwhelming mess of photos to a system that works for you. And golden rule number 1 is the very first step, and it is the backup. If you're a regular listener, you will remember this one because we've been talking about backing up a lot. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. Now, this is the most important rule out of all 5, and hence it's the golden rule number 1. Just a quick note before we start. These days I'm running the show solo, and if you're wondering where Fiona has gone, we explain it all in our last joint episode, so that's episode 120. So go back and have a listen if you have missed that one. Now, today, here is what we're going to cover. I will talk about why backing up actually matters in the first place and what it really means, because there is a lot of confusion around this. And I will share the method I've been using for years, and which I also recommend to all my clients. And we will also talk about what you should actually be backing up, because surprise, it's not just your photos. And in the end, I will share a few habits that have helped me and will hopefully also help you to basically save you from a massive headache later. So let's get into it and talk about why backup matters in the first place. And well, I think it's kind of obvious, because nobody wants to lose their photos because they hold very precious memories. But unfortunately, it happens more than people think. And it is, of course, always the same pattern. Either someone assumes it's being taken care of somehow, they go to the cloud, they backed up, I think. And the reality is that this is not really happening, or often people know they should be backing up, but it all feels too hard and they keep procrastinating. This is obviously very human, and if that's you, be reassured you are not alone. So I just want to share a few examples how you could lose photos, and hoping that never happens to you. But I've had a client whose external drive was damaged and it just stopped working one day for no obvious reason. And they had to go through 3 data recovery companies to try and get their photos back. They knew they had 25,000 photos on that drive, and eventually the 3rd company managed to get those photos back, but it cost them over 1,000 Australian dollars. And there is never a guarantee that those recovery companies can actually recover the photos. And in some cases, they are lost forever. Another example, and that was really close to home, it is the Black Saturday fires that happened in Australia, near where I live, in 2009. And, a lot of families, they've lost their entire home. And with it, there were thousands of slide, film reels, printed and digital photos, everything. They've lost everything they had. So all those childhood memories, their family history, the photos of their kids growing up, everything was gone like in one day. And another one that I actually witnessed while I was traveling in the Kakadu National Park here in Australia, we went on a river cruise, which was absolutely stunning. And it is also home to some really, really large saltwater crocodiles. So you can't swim there. You don't really want to put a finger or a toe in that water, to be honest. That's just way too dangerous. So there was a guy sitting in front of us and he was taking photos of the trip, as we all did. But then unfortunately, he suddenly dropped his camera straight into the river. So that one was gone, and that was before, mobile phones and the cloud services. So unless he had connected his camera to a computer every night to transfer photos, these photos were lost forever. And I highly doubt that he did have a computer on him on that trip. So I'm assuming it was all gone in 1 second, basically. So I know these are 3 very different stories, but they show very clearly that losing photos can really happen to anybody, and that nobody plans, obviously, to lose their photos. It just happens. So this is why backing up is golden rule number 1. Before we do anything else with our photos, we should make sure that we can't actually lose them. Now, if all of this is so obvious, why do so many people still put it off? I don't think it is laziness at all, but as I said before, most of us are pretty good at procrastinating, and it's just something that's very human. And some people procrastinate because they feel overwhelmed and they don't know where to begin. That's very common. Or others don't feel confident enough with technology and worry that they will get it wrong, or that they damage something or break something. And others, they are confused about the difference between synchronizing and backing up. And that's actually what I'm going to explain in a minute, what that difference is and why it's important to understand it. Or sometimes people also assume that it's going to be really expensive, so they just avoid thinking about it altogether. And again, if any of that is you, you're in very good company. The good thing, though, is that you're here now, and I'm about to explain a backup strategy that is pretty watertight, and it might actually be easier to implement than what you think it might be. Before I get there, though, let's talk about what a backup actually means. And I will slow down here because this is the bit where people get it wrong constantly, or they get confused about it. Let's say I ask someone, do you back up your phone? Most people say yes. But when I then look at their settings and what they actually do, it is not backed up. It is synchronized instead. And those are 2 very different things. Now, I like to use that image of think of backing up like a one-way road, because you are copying your data or your photo onto another device purely to protect that photo. So if something goes wrong on your main device, you can go back to that backup copy and restore it from there. Now, synchronizing is different. Let's say you have iCloud photos turned on your iPhone, and every photo you take gets sent up to the cloud. And if you use the Photos app on your Mac, it comes down automatically too, with the right settings, of course. So this all sounds great and easy. It's very convenient, and actually it is, in fact, a really, really good ecosystem. But there is the catch, because it's not a backup system. If you delete a photo on your phone or on your Mac, it deletes it everywhere eventually, even on the cloud, so it will be gone. And this is why this is not a backup. This is only one single copy, but it's spread across a few different devices or screens if you want. Now, just a little side note here. If you delete a photo while iCloud Photos is turned on, you do get a small grace period because Apple gives you 30 days to recover it. But once those 30 days pass, if that photo was never saved anywhere else and not backed up, it will be gone for good. And this is, by the way, also the case when you use something like Dropbox or OneDrive. Most of those cloud services have that 30-day grace period. That's just a little side note. So I'd also like to talk about one other thing. So when I talk about a proper backup, I do not mean that we copy and paste files from A to B. This is technically a backup because you make a copy. However, and that comes from, more than 10 years experience now in that field, this is exactly where I see people get into the biggest mess, because they end up with a folder called Photos or Pictures, and then one called Photos 2 and Pictures Copy, and they can't tell anymore which one is the original or when anything was copied, what is the latest version. They have completely lost track. And then it turns into hours of work just untangling that mess before they can even start organizing or do anything else with their photos. So in my view, a proper backup uses an actual system, something that is preferably automatic and reliable. And we're going to talk about those in a sec. The method I want to talk about and that I recommend is an industry standard, and it has not solely to do with photo management or backing up digital photos. It's really any digital files, and it is called the 3-2-1 method. Now, that means 3 copies of your files on 2 different types of devices, with one of those copies stored away from home, so off-site. Why 3 copies? It is simply because hard drives fail. All of them, they just do. It's not you doing anything wrong. They have a shelf life and they will eventually die. So we need to replace them. Why on 2 different types of devices? Now, this is because imagine your backup copy of your photos is on the same drive than your originals. Now, if your drive dies, the originals and the backup copy is gone and you're left with nothing. So that's why we want to spread our backups across different types of storage. So this protects you from any method letting you down. And lastly, why do we want to keep 1 copy away from home? Again, hopefully this never happens, but because if everything is sitting in your house and something happens to your house, let's say a fire or a flood or a break-in, it could happen that all of your backups go with it. So that's why we recommend to keep 1 copy away from home. Let it live somewhere else. And these days, more often than not, this would be the cloud. Now, just to give you an idea how this could look like, I'll share how my personal setup is set up. So the original files, and I'm talking about photos, but also general files, they live on the internal drive of my computer. And I have a Mac. So this is copy number 1. And then I run a backup to an external drive. And to do that, I use Time Machine that comes with every Mac that you have. If you're on a Windows computer, you've got a similar thing that's called File History. So that comes with every Windows PC. That is copy 2. So a copy of my original files goes to that external drive using Time Machine. And then I also have a cloud backup system, which is called Backblaze, and it basically does the same thing as the Time Machine, but it sends a copy to the cloud, so it's away from home. Now, as I mentioned, I use Backblaze for that, and those who've been listening for a while know that I don't often recommend specific products, but I use this one myself and have been using it for over 10 years now, and I've actually had to restore an entire laptop from it twice in that time, and it just worked like a charm. It was easy and straightforward, and it runs quietly in the background once it's set up, and you barely notice it's there. Now, there are other programs that work similarly, and you have to find what works best for you and for your setup. Now, today we're not going to go there because it is about the method, and that's what matters. So again, 3 copies on 2 different devices, one of them kept offsite. And once you've got that concept, choosing the actual tool will become so much easier. Now, let's talk about what we actually want to back up, because this matters as well. And I've mentioned it before, we're not just talking about your picture folder here. We're talking about everything. Really any digital file, whether it's a photo, a video, or a document of some kind, we want to include external drives too. Because anything that holds information that you care about should be included in your backup. Even if it's a complete mess right now, don't worry about it. You don't have to have any photos sorted yet. It doesn't matter. Back it up first, exactly as it is. And this is another reason why it's good to use a backup program like Time Machine or File History or Backblaze, if we're talking cloud, because these automatically back up all your data that you have on that drive, and you can tell them in the settings, this is good to know, that you can include external drives too. So let's assume that your internal drive doesn't have enough space to hold all your photos and you have them on an external drive. You can include that in your backup, and it usually is just a tick in the settings and you're done. And then you have peace of mind that it's all safe. Now, so far we've only talked about digital photos, but most of you probably have prints or other older media such as slides or maybe even film reels. Now, if we want to safeguard those, we of course need to digitize them, and then these digital copies will be included in your backups. We talked about some of this in the episodes 13 and 42. If you'd like to hear more about this, so you could go there and start there. Before I leave you for today, I thought I share a few things that I've learned along the way and that made a difference for myself too, not just for my clients. But firstly, every time I've transferred photos to my computer, to my photo hub, I make sure that the backup is done before I do anything with them. Only once it's backed up, I start culling, sorting, and curating those photos. And I also don't delete anything from the original source before it's all properly done, if at all, because I personally use an iPhone and a Mac, and the photos come to my Mac via the cloud. And remember, if I then delete them in one place, they're gone everywhere. So all I do is I open my Photos app, so that the photo library on my Mac populates with the new photos, and then I do a time machine and a Backblaze backup before I do anything else. Now, secondly, it is really tempting and easy to set up a backup system and forget about it after the initial setup. I really recommend to check at least occasionally, even if it's just once a year, whether it all works as it should be. Now, that means go into that backup program, have a look in there, and maybe try restoring a file or two just to confirm that it works. There is no need to restore your entire photo collection or anything like that there. It's just really one or two files. One important thing to know here is that depending on what program you use, you can't restore a file from backup system by simply double clicking it or copy pasting it into a different place. In some cases, you will have to follow a certain process to restore a file. It's not difficult, but it's just something that I like to make people aware of. Thirdly and lastly, if you're using an external hard drive as a backup drive, please label it. You don't need a fancy labeler for that. Just grab a masking tape if need to be and write down the date you started using that drive. This sounds really small, but it means that you always know how old this drive is and when it might be time to replace it. And remember, I mentioned before, not labeling things can create a mess really, really quickly. I've seen it happening so often, way too often. So, this is golden rule number 1, backup. Remember, 3 copies, 2 different devices, one of them kept offsite. And while you're at it, back up everything, not just your photos. It's actually easier. Plus, make it a habit of checking whether everything works as it should from time to time. And I like to make a note in my diary so I don't forget those sort of things. Once you've got this backup system in place, you can really relax for a moment because you will have peace of mind that your photos are safe. And whenever you're ready to take the next step, you know that they will be there. So if this sparked any questions, or if there is a topic you would love me to cover, pop it on the wish list. The link is in the show notes. And I really always love hearing from you and what's on your mind with regards to photo management. So please feel free to use that. And if you're ready to get this all sorted, I'm running a free webinar on the 27th of August. And it's a high-level look at how to get your photos backed up, organized, and finally have them under control. But of course, given it's just an hour-long webinar, there is not time enough to go through every click and setting. It's on a high level. And if you wanted a full step-by-step, that is where my paid courses come in. There is the pre-recorded self-directed DIY photo organizing course you can take, and it covers all of this in a general way that works no matter what devices you use. And if you're fully in the Apple world, so if you've got an iPhone and a Mac, I will be running live classes starting in mid-September that will cover everything that I talk about here step by step. Now, anyhow, as always, all those links are in the show notes. And this brings us to the end of this episode, which was all about golden rule number 1, backing up. And I'm looking forward to being with you again next week when I'll share the golden rule number 2, know your why. Thanks so much for listening and happy photo organizing.